At 7 in the morning, my unemployed sister showed up at the apartment I rent from my parents. "I'm moving in," she announced. Mom added, "Oh, and we're raising your rent to cover the extra expenses." When I said I'd just move out, they laughed. So I packed my things and took all the furniture with me. If you grew up in a family where help meant we'll carry you as long as you don't outgrow the arms, you learn to stand very still. You learn to make yourself small so the lifting isn't questioned. In our house, love was always currency and someone was always short on change. Dad worked 2 jobs when we were kids. Mom managed the books and converted guilt into rules. I was the reliable one. My sister, Lila, was the project. That was the word Mom used. Like Lila was a community center that needed constant fundraising. The apartment I rented from my parents wasn't a gift. It was a lever. After my breakup and a job change 2 years ago, they offered a discount if I rented the upstairs unit of a duplex they owned, 2 miles from their house. "Keep it in the family," Dad had said. Mom added, "And if something ever happens, we can help quickly." The lease was in writing. The furniture, however, was mine. I bought it in pieces over the years: sofa from a going-out-of-business sale, a dining table off Marketplace, 2 bookshelves, a mattress that arrived rolled up like a rug. My money, my receipts. Lila had been edging closer to rock bottom for months, though in our house rock bottom always came with pillows. She bounced between creative pursuits and burnout breaks, which looked suspiciously alike. When she got fired from a boutique for missing 3 weekends in a row, "wellness time" was her phrase. Mom called me that night. "She just needs stability," Mom said. Like stability was a couch you could push across the floor and wedge under someone's anxiety. "She could stay with you a while." I said no. Not because I didn't love my sister, but because love without boundaries is just access. I thought the boundary was clear until that morning. The one with the key rattling at my lock at 7 a.m., the dull percussion of a suitcase bumping each stair, and the practiced smile on my mother's face. Lila stood there wearing an oversized cardigan like it was proof of gentleness. Mom was behind her, holding a bakery box and the grin of a person who'd brought a solution rather than a problem. "Good news," Mom said as if we were announcing a scholarship. "She's moving in just for a bit. And sweetheart," she looked down at a piece of paper folded in quarters, "your rent will need to go up. Only fair. We're still well below market." It was almost funny how clean it all was. A locked triangle. My parents owned the property. I rented from them. My sister needed a soft landing. I could either be generous or be the villain. The script had no third option, but I've learned to write my own lines. "Great," I said, stepping aside. I let them wheel the suitcase in. I took the bakery box and set it on the counter. Then I walked to my bedroom, opened my bottom drawer, and took out a folder of receipts. That's the day I learned how easy it is to redraw a map when you own the furniture. Mom's paper wasn't legal. It was a printout of a Zillow listing from 6 blocks away highlighted in yellow. "Market rate," she said, tapping the number like tapping it would make it truer. Lila wandered the living room with her arms out like a child measuring space for a cartwheel. "It's so cozy," she said. She tried the couch, then the armchair. "I'll take this corner." I poured coffee into 3 mugs. I don't drink mine with sugar, but I added 2 spoonfuls and watched it sink like small white planets. Then I set the sweet one in front of Mom without comment. "About the lease," I said. "It doesn't say anything about roommates." Mom blinked. "Family is not a roommate. It becomes one when it shares the square footage I pay for." She smiled like a kindergarten teacher. "You don't need to lawyer me, honey." "I'm not lawyering you," I said. "I'm reading." I flipped through my folder and slid out a copy of the lease. Dad had printed it from a template 3 years ago. It wasn't airtight. It was tight enough. Lila dropped her tote bag near the coffee table. "Mom," she said in a stage whisper, "he's being weird." Mom looked at me the way a person looks at a stubborn jar. "We're not asking," she said finally. "We're informing. And the rent goes up next month. Modest increase." She touched the Zillow number again, then folded the paper into quarters like she could shrink the audacity if she made it small enough. I took a slow sip. "Great," I said again, and this time I meant it differently. "Give me 2 hours." Mom brightened. "To cool off." "To make a list," I said, and I smiled back. Lila checked her phone and delivered her first small reveal. "I told a couple friends I'd be here," she said. "They can help me move my stuff." She held up the key Mom had given her. "You won't even notice." I looked around my living room, my couch, my chair, my lamp, my table. and wondered what notice would look like when all the nouns belonged to me. There is nothing like writing down what you own to realize who you are. I pulled every receipt from the folder and laid them on the dining table like tarot. Sofa, paid cash, store closing sale. Bookshelves, self-assembly, 2 extra screws taped to the back. Desk, Craigslist meetup in a parking lot at noon. Coffee table, gift from a friend who moved states. Bed frame, metal, bolts still remember the hand that tightened them. Mattress, my spine's one true love. I photographed each item with my phone and saved the pictures to an album called Inventory. Then I opened the Notes app and wrote 3 columns. Item, proof, exit plan. The plan wasn't to hurt anyone. It was to reset the consequence equation. In our family, consequences evaporated when Mom decided that intent mattered more than outcome. She didn't mean to, was the holy water. I am not the priest. I texted my friend Marcus, who owns a moving van and a temper like a still lake. Need help moving today. Paid gig. You free? He replied in 2 bubbles. Of course. When? And then is this a family thing? Yes, I wrote. So I need the quiet kind of help. While I waited, I walked the rooms. Lila had already claimed space as if claiming created ownership. Her tote bag had spilled a hairbrush and 3 lip balms onto the coffee table. Mom had put the bakery box on the counter and opened it just enough to show the pastry like a bribe. Eat something, she called from the hall as if carbs dissolve resistance. I ate half a croissant to be polite and because butter makes plotting warmer. Then I called my bank to confirm the automatic rent transfer date. I pulled up the lease and the text history where Mom reminded me. Always the first of the month, please. I stared at the line and thought, always works both ways. Mom drifted back in. You'll see this is best, she said, voice soft and patronizing. You two can support each other. Support isn't a hammock, I said. It's a beam. It holds something up. She didn't laugh. Lila needs time. I'm not selling time, I said. I'm paying for square feet. She looked hurt and tried another angle. You know your sister struggles, right? I said. And struggle doesn't earn her a key to my boundary. Marcus texted again, 30 minutes out. Where should I park? And I felt the shape of the afternoon click into place like a puzzle piece turned the right way. Marcus arrived with a plain white van that made no promises. He parked at the curb without backing up to the door like we were stealing a bank vault. He walked in with a canvas tool belt and a hello that sounded like a shrug. What's the job? He asked. I pointed at the living room. Everything that's mine. Nothing that isn't. Mom appeared from the hallway, eyebrows already forming the word no, you can't possibly. I can't, I said. And I will. I handed her a copy of my inventory with the receipts clipped behind it like a museum catalog. We'll leave the fixtures. And anything you or Dad bought. Lila sat on the arm of the couch, scrolling. You're overreacting. Think of it as reacting on time, I said. Just once. Marcus and I moved like librarians. Careful, quiet, with the respect of people who believe in both objects and the stories they hold. We wrapped the sofa in moving blankets, lifted the bookshelves, unscrewed the legs from the dining table, and labeled each bolt with painter's tape so the future would be easier than the present. Mom called Dad on speaker. His voice came through like a weather report. Neutral clouds with a chance of disappointment. Son, be reasonable, he said. It's still our building. It is, I said. And this is still my furniture. Your sister has nowhere to go. She has a family, I said. She has parents. I looked at the ceiling. She has it downstairs. Silence. Then Dad sighed in a way that meant, I don't like this, but I won't stop you. Mom hung up without a goodbye. Lila opened the bakery box, took out the largest pastry, and set it deliberately on the bare patch of coffee table where my coasters had just been. She looked at me as the jam bled toward the edge and said, Oops. I handed her a napkin. Boundaries are messy before they're clean, I said, and kept moving. Before we loaded the last chair, I drove to a shipping store and mailed myself a copy of the inventory with a time-stamped receipt. It's a small thing, but sometimes small things pile up into the shape of a wall. I also dropped an envelope at my credit union, updated address for future statements, and, while I was there, I canceled the automatic rent transfer. Not because I planned to default, but because paying by check creates a line of intention. When a system is being gamed, step out of the system. On the way back, I stopped at the hardware store and bought a new deadbolt. For the storage unit, I rented online in the parking lot with 3 taps. The unit number felt like a new password. Marcus texted, "Neighbors curious." I said, "We're refreshing the layout." I smiled. Our block had a surveillance department disguised as retirees. Let them wonder. When I returned, Mom was at the window pretending not to watch the van. Lila had moved on to organizing my kitchen by putting my knives in a jar and my spices in the trash, because most of these are old. I fished out the cumin like a rescue and said nothing. The less I taught her about my systems, the fewer maps she had to sabotage. Mom pulled me aside. "You will still pay the increased rent," she said, trying out the sentence like a shoe in the store. "We've decided." "I haven't," I said, and walked back to the van. We finished by late afternoon. An empty room preaches in a voice no person can imitate. The lines where the couch had pressed the carpet looked like years. The pale rectangle on the wall where the bookshelf had blocked the sun looked like a ghost story. I left the lamp, because Dad had bought that lamp for the place before I moved in. I left the curtain rods, because they were screwed into the wall. I left the cheap blinds that came with the unit, because even pride has limits. Lila stood in the doorway and tried to convert it into a win. "I like minimalism," she said. "It's very breathable." "Great," I said. "You'll have room to reflect." Mom's voice thinned. "You're being cruel." "I'm being accurate," I said. "Accuracy looks cruel to people who live on soft focus." I handed Mom a cashier's check for the current month's original rent amount, stapled to a letter that said, "Effective immediately. I will be vacating the premises within 30 days per Clause 9 of the lease. Please direct all further communication to my email. All keys will be returned on the final day. Any attempt to alter the premises without my consent until that date will be documented." She read it and shook her head like the words refused to arrange into a sentence. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere with beams instead of hammocks," I said. Lila's friends arrived carrying a potted plant and a Bluetooth speaker, looking like a lifestyle ad for denial. They stepped into the empty living room and froze. "Where's the couch?" one of them asked. "In storage," I said, "where it respects me." People don't beg anymore. They convene. By evening, there was a family group chat hearing in progress. My aunt posted a string of question marks. My cousin sent a long paragraph about compassion. Mom posted a picture of the empty room with the caption, "He left us like this." The us was doing a lot of heavy lifting. I wrote exactly 3 messages. 1. I removed property I purchased. 2. I gave notice per the lease. 3. Future rent at original rate will be paid by check on the 1st until move out. Then I muted the chat and went back to lifting. Marcus and I loaded the last box. Books, repair manuals for a life, and closed the van. He leaned on the door, breathing evenly. "You good?" he asked. "Getting there," I said. He nodded at the upstairs window where Lila and 2 friends were peering through the blinds like owls. "They look mad," he said. "They look new to consequence," I said. "It's a confusing emotion." Mom texted me privately, "We'll be changing the locks tonight." I replied, "That will be an illegal lockout. Please don't. Keys will be returned on move-out day as agreed." I took a photo of the front door and saved it to a new album called Documentation. The next 5 days were quiet like snow. Mom didn't change the locks. Lila pretended she was in love with floor cushions. She posted a story to her social media about embracing simplicity with a boho filter over the empty room. The Bluetooth speaker lived on the floor like a shrine to bass. I spent those days moving deliberately. After work, I ferried boxes to the storage unit and labeled each one with a word that made sense only to me. Kitchen steel, bedroom soft, office wires. I filed an address change with the post office and rerouted my packages to a friends and family mailbox service Marcus runs out of his shop. I transferred my utilities end of month. I took pictures of everything I left, each timestamp a small grain of sanity. On the 6th day, I found Lila in my bedroom going through my dresser. "I thought you had some extra t-shirts," she said, holding one up like a flag of convenience. "Put that down," I said, "and leave the room." She smiled. "We're family. We're also 2 adults," I said. "Try acting like one." Cliffhanger beat. That night, Mom knocked on the door with a casserole and a speech. "Let's be reasonable," she said. "We'll cancel the rent increase if you let Lila stay through winter. She's fragile." "I'm not the weatherman," I said. "I'm moving out in 12 days. On day 10, Mom posted a Facebook status so vague it might as well have had my name on it. "Sometimes the people you sacrifice for are the ones who turn their backs." Her friends responded with hearts and "Stay strong, Mama." My phone pinged like a distant alarm, and I ignored it. Boundaries are louder than applause if you listen correctly. Lila stepped up the campaign with noise. She hosted 4 friends for a music night in the empty living room. Bass travels, irony does too. I knocked once and said, "Turn it down." She rolled her eyes and turned it up. I called the non-emergency number and asked a polite question about noise ordinances. The officer who arrived spoke gently to Lila about decibels and time limits like a teacher discussing fractions. The music went quiet. At 1 a.m., I got a text from an unknown number. "You're a monster." Then another, "She's family." Then a third with a screenshot of my mom's post and 47 comments under it. People will do anything to avoid saying, "She crossed a line," except cross it with you. I turned my phone face down and slept the best I had in weeks. On move-out morning, I made pancakes. Not as a peace offering. As a ritual. I stacked 3 on a plate, added butter, watched it melt and run like small rivers. Lila walked in wearing one of my hoodies. "Can I have some?" she asked. "You can make your own," I said, and slid the pan toward her. She sighed like labor was a bad habit and poured batter poorly, so it ran into the shape of a map she didn't know how to read. Mom came by with a plastic tub full of cleaning supplies. "Be sure to leave the place tidy," she said, like this was my first move out. "I always do," I said. I handed her an envelope with 2 keys and a final letter. Premises vacated. Keys returned. Security deposit to be returned per state law within 30 days, less any itemized damages. Please mail to address on file. She looked at the bare living room, and then at me as if I were breaking a tradition older than law. "You could have just said no," she whispered. "I did," I said. "You said family." I said lease. We both meant what we said. Before I closed the van, I pulled the last item from the wall, a small framed photo of me and Dad building a birdhouse when I was 10. I left it on the counter. Not because I was sentimental, because that was theirs. My new apartment is across town, 3 floors up, with afternoon light and a landlord who answers emails. Marcus helped me carry the sofa into its new corner. We reassembled the table and checked the labels on the bolts like we were blessing a bridge. I put my books back in their approximate old order. Practical first, philosophy second, fiction where it could catch the sun. 2 days after move-out, Mom called from a landline as if the past had better reception. "Lila says you took everything," she said. "I took mine," I said. "The difference is important." "She's upset. Being told no often looks like grief," I said. "It fades." A week later, I received a certified letter from my parents itemizing damages. It listed the cost of a sofa and a dining table, my sofa and my table. I sent back a copy of my inventory with dates and prices and a short note. These items were never part of the leasehold improvements. As previously documented, they belonged to me and were removed prior to lease termination. I CC'd a friend who is, unfortunately for them, an attorney. The itemized claim evaporated like fog in sunlight. In the quiet that followed, I noticed something. I wasn't angry. I was edited. The parts of me that explained and softened and overfunctioned had been cut out cleanly. In their place, a beam, not a hammock. 2 months later, Lila got a part-time job. Not because of my speeches. Because rent in an empty room is a relentless teacher. Mom emails me occasionally about family gatherings. I go sometimes. I bring dessert. I leave when the word sacrifice starts to circulate like incense. Last week, Dad and I built a second birdhouse on his porch. He measured twice before each cut, like a person who has learned what precision saves. We didn't talk about the apartment. We talked about where to hang it, front yard or back, visible or hidden. We settled on the maple by the sidewalk where anyone could see it and no one could reach. That night, I sat on my reclaimed couch in my reclaimed light and ate a pastry from the same bakery box source. No speech required. Butter, flour, sugar, simple truths. I raised a mug to the quiet and said out loud what I now believe. Love is not access. Love is respect plus a locked door plus an invitation. And whenever someone asks me if I regret not letting my sister move in, I tell them the truth. She did move in, I say, just not with me. Family systems don't shatter, they resettle. Over the next year, the story revised itself in relatives' mouths the way stories do when they need a villain. In one version, I was the ungrateful son who took advantage of his parents' generosity. In another, I was the cold brother who left his sister on a floor cushion. In none of them was I the tenant who honored his contract, the adult who drew a line, the person who understood that kindness with no boundary is a fuse. When you change your part, the play keeps going without you. That's the secret no one tells you because it sounds lonely. It isn't. It's the first honest quiet after a band stops pretending they're in tune. If you listen carefully, you can hear the next song getting ready. Some nights I still think about the pale rectangle on the wall where my bookshelf used to be. It felt, for a moment, like a loss. Now I know it was a negative space, a reminder that absence is a shape with its own edges. You can lean on it. You can even build from it. I didn't slam any doors. I closed them. There's a difference. One is about noise. The other is about finish. My door closes smoothly. It locks. And when I open it, it's because I decided to, not because someone folded a piece of paper into quarters and called it love.